Nothing's happening here.
Patience, my dear. Good morning.
Good morning.
To reiterate yesterday in one sentence,
Okay.
the basic fact is also the only fact, and this fact is this actuality, period. All of the elaborations, all of the enumerations, all of the subtleties turn out to be nothing other than the basic fact, the sole fact, this here. The challenge of so-called delusion is that it pretends to create so much complexity and elaboration that seems to be actual and seems to be actual differentiations and actual multiple aspects that somehow need to be made sense of or incorporated or addressed or engaged with. But this is not the case. All apparent elaborations, all apparent differentiations do not depart in the very even slightest degree, to any degree whatsoever, from the basic condition, from this presence, from this actuality that is, and that alone is. Now, as we explored and you just started, Stan, you haven't missed much. As we explored in great, what?
It doesn't seem to be on.
Well, that's your problem, not mine. I'm on my end. Anyway, as we explored yesterday in at great length, all of these apparent differentiations, all of these apparent conditions, all of these apparent circumstances and entities and situations and time and space and causality and being and success and failure and all of this have absolutely no importance whatsoever, because none of these add to or subtract from or in any way impact this fundamental fact, this fundamental actuality. They appear to occur within it, yes, but they are not actually anything other than this one fact. You just, yeah, you can do that in the kitchen. Anyway, another aspect of this consideration of all of this apparent diversification, all this apparent complexity, is that in looking at these, all of these apparent entities, circumstances, details, and so on and so forth, none of these conditions can actually be resolved. None of these conditions can actually be determined as to being anything in particular at all. So we have the very strange, very irrational condition where all of these various aspects and circumstances seem to appear, but cannot actually be found, cannot be isolated, cannot be determined, cannot be defined, cannot be located, cannot have any aspect of any actuality of what they are found at all. And this applies across the board. Strangely enough, this even applies to the sole fact. The sole fact cannot even be found as a fact. It cannot be found as anything. And yet, it doesn't go away, apparently. Here it is, apparently. So the fact that it isn't anything in particular is not an issue. It turns out to be just another delightful reiteration of the nature of this condition, that it is absolutely transcendental. It is absolutely nothing or anything or question mark. And in this delightful solution, and fundamentally in the delightful absolute non-impact of all appearances on the actual condition. In other words, what happens, it doesn't matter what happens, what seems to happen, because it doesn't actually change the actual condition, the actual fact, one iota. Is it delightful? Who gives a shit? Doesn't matter. So there's an ease, there's a letting go, there's an enjoyment, there's a blanket entitlement and empowerment towards anything, towards looseness, towards enjoyment, towards anything whatsoever, because it just doesn't matter at all what happens, what you seem to do, what you seem to not do, whether you succeed, whether you fail. So you are free. You are off the hook. It does not matter what happens. It does not matter how you engage with it. On the other hand, having said that, as we discussed yesterday, although it doesn't matter, it is possible to come to see very clearly that it doesn't matter and why it doesn't matter and how it doesn't matter. And in that seeing, there is let's say an empowerment to partake of this delightful freedom. And it's possible to also not see this, and in not seeing this delightful freedom, it may seem to be the case that one can seem to be caught up in all sorts of problems and issues and suffering and turmoil and basically what we might think of as the normal human condition, a normal human mindset. So that being the case, it may be possible to take advantage of this little loophole that it is possible to come to discover profoundly, intimately, and self-verifyingly the way in which this is what it is, the way in which this is entirely free, and get to enjoy and take advantage of that fact. You don't actually get anything for doing that, and you don't actually lose anything for not doing that. If you find yourself engaged in life as a veil of tears and banging your head against the wall of this shitty life and the inevitability of pain, death, and failure, that's cool. Nothing get lost, no harm, no foul, because again, it does not matter what actually seems to be happening. So failure is a total non-issue. Success is a non-issue. Pain is a non-issue. Pleasure is a non-issue. Success is a non-issue. Failure is a non-issue. But again, the difference between knowing this and not knowing this, subjectively, we might say, can seem to be rather impactful. So the whole bent, the whole point of all this spirituality stuff is for conniving, clever people like ourselves to take advantage of this loophole in the reality laws. And you're completely embedded in things. You're screwed. You're flotsam in the great hurricane of eternity, eternally. And yet, it's possible to discover that none of that matters but one iota. And if you take advantage of that, and yet that little clause, then you get to laugh if you want, or not if you want. So anyway, so all of this spirituality stuff is really a trick. Is really a loophole. It can actually be parsed very, very convincingly as a mode of insanity. It can be parsed very, very convincingly as a kind of an insane mindset of completely letting go of all rationality into a condition of whatever. Into a condition of no condition, a condition of conditionlessness. And I have no problem with that at all. So again, the point is not what it is, because what it is ultimately turns out to be unfindable, ungraspable, undefinable anyway. The point is that it may or may not be possible to engage with this in this way, to explore this in this way, to partake of the joy of this incredible, inconceivable bizarreness that this actually is, as opposed to being with it stupidly, dully, and painfully. And if that were possible, you're free to have at it. And of course, this is what we're here for. We spoke about this at great length in many aspects and ramifications and nuances yesterday, as those of you who are here will recall. So that's a kind of a recap. But to get back to the core and essence of the recap and of the whole weekend and of everything whatsoever, this actuality, exactly as it is the sole fact, the sole condition, the sole actuality, the sole entity, the sole thing, the sole nothing, the sole anything. Just this one that is actual, that is right here. And it it seems to present as all sorts of seemings of apparition that seem to have implications about what it may be or how it works. And none of these are actually coherent. None of these are actually effective. None of these actually do anything. And especially none of these actually add to or subtract from this fundamental condition as it is, which alone exists, which you are, which the universe is, which all of reality is. That being the case, you're free to enjoy that fact. So did I succeed in completely recapping every nuance of yesterday's discussion?
Yes.
How nice.
Yes.
I'm brilliant or lucky.
Speaking of parsing, it seems that when I have this discussion with people, it often gets parsed by them as looking like anarchy, and which doesn't bother me, but seems to be disturbing too.
But why parse it as anarchy? Why not parse it as absolute monolithic control? I mean, how can you can't say when you can't say what it is, that doesn't disprove order. Order is just another thing that is a possibility, a possible explanation. No possible explanation can be resolved as being actual. So any explanation is fine. So use explanations for your convenience. It's like any spin doctoring is allowed. So do it for your joy, pleasure, and empowerment. An opportunity, and to get people to give you money if you're clever. So if seeing it as anarchy floats your boat, have at it. If seeing it as an absolute monolithic divine, fiat of absolute minute control of the complete quantum state of every quark throughout all space-time and history and all the multiverses, have it that way. Who cares? Because none of these ways of parsing it can actually be found.
Right.
So they're all just bullshit. They're all just spin doctoring.
That part I get, but
Yeah.
I like your argument for anarchy. That's good.
Well, the point is anarchy.
Yeah.
That it's anarchy or that it's anything is completely arbitrary assertion.
Exactly.
That it exists at all is an arbitrary assertion. That it doesn't exist is an arbitrary assertion. I mean, it's weirder than weird. It's beyond being a question. It's beyond being an answer. It's beyond being anything. Even that it is actual cannot be found. And yet, by default, one can claim it as the sole actuality, because try and prove otherwise. Anyway, I mean, in short, anything that is said of it is not true, not
Right.
provable, not findable, not discoverable. Anything, even that it is, even that it exists. So calling it an actuality, calling it the sole actuality, is trying to slip a fast one by you. And yet, that's pretty much the fundamental lie. So we may as well start there, just because we have something to talk about. Or else we can just go, hang out in the park or go see a movie or something. That's cool too. but then I wouldn't have an excuse to milk you all for the thousands of dollars for this weekend without using to stuff my retirement fund. It is thousands of dollars, right? You guys paid thousands each, right?
I
hope.
need $20 back.
Yeah, 8,000 each.
And then I'd have egg on my face. He's been selling us bullshit.
There's nothing else to sell.
Yeah, really.
Yes, Dan.
Well, I'm so, as always, I don't mind doing this. This feels like I'm going back to square one, but not in a good way. You know, it's like.
There's no bad way, so
Well,
how about
there
it?
we go.
Square one is the
So they
place
say.
to be.
So anyway, I dropped my kid off to college yesterday, and it was more devastating for me than for him. And he's going to something that's really cool. And for me, it brings up all my abandonment issues, et cetera. And so anyway, very interesting to watch. You know, and there's this feeling of just sort of instability from it. And at the same time, you know, at the same time, I'm not sure exactly how to describe this, but it's going, I'll do it in Douglas Harding's terms. It's like going from third person to first person, where you're seeing the stuff as a problem from almost as from the outside, but then also going to extreme subjective, and then there's a rawness there, where, you know, here, it's me. You know, and I guess the question is if this is, I mean, the loophole is this, but this is not findable. So
It's also not losable. So don't paint it's not being findable as in any way a problem.
yeah, it's not losable. That by definition is not seeable then, because it's, you know, it's
Nothing else is seeable.
well then. Yeah. Then again, there's okay. Fine. I'm left with nothing to. Well, I'm left with nothing to do and nothing to realize. Fine.
Cool.
That sounds great. Sounds great, but that's not.
You graduate. Congratulations,
Well,
ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
Bring out that diploma.
Yeah.
I love this.
But the condition is the condition, the realization, the whatever is nothing different than anything before.
Right.
You're still. So okay. Let's pretend I say.
Do the math, dude.
Okay, so let's pretend.
Take it all away. Come on, you're right
Okay, there
here.
you go. So let's pretend I say. So why am I here? And you can say, exactly. And I can say, okay. So so I didn't have to come at all to this.
That's right.
And just let me finish it out. Let's see what else.
No, I know. Take it all the
So I
way.
might as well just go to 7-Eleven, buy some cigarettes and some booze, and go back to you know, acting as if things mattered, and
Or not.
well, no, they matter. In my case, they matter. I can go out there and go, oh, they don't matter.
It doesn't matter. That
It
it
would
doesn't
be.
matter.
I know that. I mean, I know you'd say that. You know, and
Tag.
so
This is good.
yeah. So there you go. Take that.
So take that somewhere. So you're taking it to things do matter. Is that where you're taking it to?
I'm here because this matters. At least what I thought it is.
Okay, this matters. Okay, cool. If there was mattering, it would be this that matters, for sure.
Whatever the hell that is.
Yeah.
All I can do is get more. I mean, all I can do, and again, I'm getting back into this thing. That's why I'm here, because I'm you know, doing something. Is to get a little more immediate with, you know, what's here.
Okay, cool.
I think that's too much. Because how do I get immediate with something I don't know what it is?
How do you? But you already are immediate with it, so you want to get immediate with it, so it's a done deal. So you can check that off your list, and then you can go to the 7-Eleven and get the cigarettes
Well,
and the booze.
I would like to be the one that knows this objectively, as opposed to it doesn't matter. You know, I like that. It matters to me, first person here, that I understand the freedom, or that I experience the freedom,
Okay.
that I'm able to partake of the freedom, I'd rather not be the one that sort of just, it doesn't matter that I don't realize it, but
Well, you're defining yourself as not realizing it. You're defining yourself as not partaking of the freedom. It sounds to me like what you're really saying is you're wanting it to not matter.
what not matter?
I don't know, anything. You're the one that has something that matters. You need to tell me what it is. What matter? What does matter?
What does matter?
Yeah, success, failure, avoiding pain, finding
No.
psychological
I
fulfillment.
mean, for me personally,
Yeah, of course, for
if
you.
I can put my words, I would say to see things as if for the first time, all the time. I mean, that'd be a wonderful way of living.
Have you ever seen what you're seeing right now before? Seriously, look at it.
No, I know. And
Don't just know it, see it. I mean,
Yeah.
look at me.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen me look exactly like this before? It's just a fact. I mean, it's not even
Right.
subtle. It's just, okay, it's a given. And yet there's this strange phenomenon of having seen me apparently many times before, the way the memory reconstructs it as referring to prior actualities and so on and so forth, that also may seem to be present now. Cool. Okay. More weirdness in the stew.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, all that. And there's emotional things that come up, feelings and so that surge up, and you know, orientations, desires, motivations, various textures. I mean, you know, again, and they're here, and the exact gestalt of the stew of whatever that is at the instant. Have you ever felt exactly that before? I mean, precisely. I mean, yeah, sure. Oh, yeah, I felt like this, you know, but really exactly the way you feel exactly right now.
the way you're getting in right now is a very immediate sort of surfing.
Sure.
And that how can I say this without getting into a riddle talk?
It's okay.
Well,
Spit it out.
it is something that immediacy, again, it's me becoming very immediate. And your point is, no, it's already immediate. But there is a move that I can make to surf more.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So that move that you can make,
Do it.
A, do it,
Yeah.
and B, what state were you in prior to that? Were you actually in a state prior to that, or were you simply coming out of a fantasy of generality into an actuality of specifics? You know, a real powerful point in this yoga, a very, very powerful point, is that real-time experience is made of specifics. It is not made of generalities. Okay? Period. So the field of vision is exactly what it is in the instant. And it's never presented exactly the configuration it does in any instant in any prior occasion. Right? That's the actual condition. The generality is, oh, I'm just seeing Helen's, you know, living room. I've seen it dozens of times before. It looks more or less the same. More or less the same is a euphemism for entirely different. Okay? So again, the generalities create a seeming sameness, create the fantasy of a seeming, you know, well, this is the same as it was last time, and you know, I'm stuck in this thing, as opposed to the actuality, which is absolute novelty. You know, the specifics are exactly what they are, and they are unlike any other set of specifics has ever been before and will ever be again, if there was a before and again. Because the specifics of before and again don't resolve into a nice before and a nice again. Even now, the generality of now the specific of now doesn't resolve into the generality of now. The specific of now is like,
Yes. Okay.
you know, and there are no generalities. There's a fantasy of generalities, which occurs now. And if you look very, very closely at the fantasy of generalities, it's actually made of a specific presence in real time that is in fact unique.
Wow. It's like generalities can be.
Generalities are the ball and chain. Generalities are the devil's glue. Generalities are the devil's vomit. I don't know. I'm trying to think of a nice dramatic image of, Satan entrapping the hapless souls in the bondage of delusion through generalities. Satan's flypaper. Generalities are Satan's flypaper.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
It's a generality. My experience with generalities, when you just
Very
feels
catchy.
they can be a lot more specific than you think they can.
Well, generalities don't exist. Generalities are the specifics in the instant. They pretend to be generalities through a kind of a hypnosis. Just through spin doctoring. Generalities pretend to be generalities the same way politicians pretend to be saying anything. It's exactly the same mechanism. It's spin doctoring. Oh God, here I am at Helen's again. We're having this talk. What am I going to say? I keep saying the same tired bullshit every time I come down here. It's oh God, I got to come up with something to say. These people are going to be bored stiff. Shit, it's only 10:30 and I got to go to the floor. What am I going to say, right? It's easy to go there. It's effortless to go there, right? But it's nothing. It's absolutely nothing. All of that is an absolutely unique train of thought that is never precise. The preciseness of it has never happened before and will never happen again exactly the way it did. So it's an example of present uniqueness, present novelty, present transcendentality, in the sense that it completely transcends analyzing, getting a handle on, determining, pinning down, because there's nothing like it to compare it to. Because anything that would be similar is so utterly different that that's apples and oranges.
Right. Thank you.
For what?
Wow.
So you're basically saying stay present in your experience.
Well, I'm saying you are present to your experience.
Right.
You don't need to stay or not stay.
Yeah,
You can pretend to not stay present with your experience, but when are you going to do that? Where are you going to do that?
Yeah, even that is present.
Daydreaming.
No, you know. Okay, Lewis.
Yes. Okay. Going back to you've written or stated that everything comes from the same being. You've even used the words pure energy consciousness. My question is, why is there so much violence and conflict of opinion, beliefs, crime, and war?
Why shouldn't there be?
It doesn't feel like the same.
The same as what?
The same.
Does violence and war and all the other things you listed, they have being, and the being that they have is the same being that everything else has. So clearly it is an expression of the same being. If I took this glass and threw it at you and hit you in the face painfully and shattered and cut your face, that would be a being that it would be just as much of a being as us sitting here having a polite conversation. So being is not depend upon being nice. Being doesn't depend upon being pretty, being solved, being harmonious.
I think the key word here is conflict. There's conflict in the being.
You can say there's apparent conflict, but the conflict is not a conflict of being. The beingness of conflicting elements. Let's say the jihadis. Let's get specific here. Let's imagine some group of jihadis over there. Let's imagine some group of, capitalists somewhere who are, bitter enemies trying to kill each other and inflict pain and suffering and death and behead each other on video to get high YouTube ratings and so on and so forth. Let's suppose all that's happening, and let's define that as conflict. The being of the capitalists and the being of the jihadis is the same being. There's no conflict in the being. The being has no conflict. The only conflict is in what it looks like. And it's all you can say is it's apparent conflict. Conflict is spin doctored into existence by seeing things in a certain way. For example, a physicist might come and look at you with an instrument and see a cloud of quarks. They might come and look at me with the instruments and see a cloud of quarks. And so our interaction is basically two clouds of quarks that are somehow coexisting, resonating in the ways that they do, right? I mean, they could look at the as you hear my words and as it affects biochemical changes in your brains through the through the sound waves going through your nerves, right, and so on and so forth. All of that shows up as the quarks doing certain things, right? And me speaking, my vocal cords are moving, and there's neurochemical activity in my brain and blah blah, and that all looks like quarks moving around in certain ways. And so a physicist can look at this dance of quarks and see us interacting. Now, if you were beheading me, it would still look like a cloud of quarks with different dancing around and interacting in perfect harmony. As the knife sluiced through my neck, hopefully you'd have taken the trouble to sharpen the knife so it goes smooth. You don't have to hack away for 20 minutes. Damn, I should have sharpened this damn. So let's suppose you're graceful enough to use a sharp knife and it sluices through my neck. The physicists look at the cloud of quarks and they look at and they notice, as the life functionality ceases in my body, they notice the quarks beginning to behave with different resonance patterns, but the quarks are still there. They're perfectly happy. Quarks aren't hurt. Quarks don't care whether I'm alive or dead. Quarks don't even show up as a me or a not me. They don't show up as a live me or a dead me, except in terms of sort of overall resonance patterns. The way the resonance patterns of quarks seem to behave in a dead brain might look different than the resonance patterns of the way the quarks apparently interact quantum-wise in a live brain. And so that would be observable, but there would be no conflict showing up at all. It would just be a pattern of quarks. So that's a perfectly viable way of seeing it. Mm-hmm. So spin doctoring is seeing it superficially as, oh, there's them and there's us, and they espouse this and we espouse that, and they're trying to kill us and we want to be alive, and so we want to kill them back to keep them from killing us or to make lots of money, which is what it really is, whatever. Right. All of that is just a very partial view, and a very arbitrary partial view of an incredibly subtle phenomena, which can be seen with infinite different other partial views. And from each of those partial views, it presents itself within a drastically different context.
Okay, so now Marina wrote this. You are present, there's nothing to do but notice that, in reaction to what you said to her. Which this is what I thought right after you said it, and yet that's not it. In other words, noticing there's still an extra screen in there.
Wait, why? What? How?
Oh.
Who? When? Does that cover all the WHs?
What's more?
Sorry, that was a little facetious on my part. What's this extra screen? I'm trying to find an extra screen.
Okay.
So I'm trying to find any screen, let alone an extra one.
Okay. Okay, there's nothing to do but notice that. Why am I using your words?
Yeah. Stand up for yourself. Come on, man up. Cowboy up. Pony up.
Yeah.
Or woman up in your case.
It's so easy right here to just be in the isness, whatever. And back to, no, I'm not going to go to Stan either. Let's be with me. Or the apparent me. But then we leave here and
all of a sudden you cease to exist. It stops. That's because I don't exist, and when you're not in my experiential field, you disappear. So stay in my experiential field and you'll continue to exist. Very simple. Works for me. I always stay in my experiential field and I'm always here.
And that's how you make money.
what? And what'd you say?
And that's how you make money.
Oh,
That was a joke. Maybe it wasn't a joke.
no.
Do you feel like you cease to exist when you leave my August presence? Or my July presence or my September presence?
Okay,
Yes,
no.
or like September.
Okay, just see
You're
now.
not going to dance around me. Try it though. Try it. I'd love to see it. I'd love to see it. Maybe you can. Huh?
Well, this isn't bullshit. It's really sincere. It's
I
just
know.
all slipped away right now.
Okay.
Okay, so so
So what happens if you go out into the world and what do you lose? What is different? What do you gain? What changes? I mean, really, what's it seem like? How does that seem to you?
yeah. Well, I went out in the world yesterday,
Sure.
and it didn't change
Okay, cool.
because I was whatever. What does it seem? Okay, so I'm gonna say, oh God, I feel like I'm gonna slip back into that. It's the way Stan was kind of saying it, a good way he was saying it, is that,
Thank you.
no, okay, so I go out in the world, let's say it's not right after this, but whatever, and then I start, and then the generalities flood in,
Right. Okay.
and
You start oriented generalities. Okay,
I
cool.
orient to generalities, and I guess it's more of a question to you, maybe. Do you never orient to generalities?
Sure. I do.
Never?
Sure, I do.
You do.
But generalities aren't generalities. Generalities are specifics.
So
There's not generalities and specifics.
I got it. Okay, so do you never don't see double negative, the specifics in the generalities.
I never done. That's just I can't. I'm busy. You beat me. You win. I never don't. Oh my God.
Please, just a second. You always
Okay.
see the specifics and the generalities question mark, Peter.
Just like you do.
I
The specifics never go away. The generalities never go away. To the extent they are generalities, and to the extent they are specifics. Do you stop seeing when you go out of here? Does your field of vision disappear? How do you know to stop your car when you see a red light? That's a specific. It may also be a generality. You may have a generalization. Oh, it's a red light. I better stop my car. But it's so specific. Generalities are not opposite of specifics. Specifics are not opposite of generalities.
Okay.
Generalities don't actually exist. The specifics don't actually exist. They're just different ways that this can seem to be quasi-organized within a categorizational scheme, which is spontaneous and basically totally random and creative anyway.
So I'm back where Stan was.
Yeah.
Which is what am I doing here?
What are you doing here? I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you what I'm doing here.
Good. Tell me what you're doing here.
There are these openings, or whatever you call them, awareness. But then I say awareness, and you shoot the hole in awareness. So I don't want to say awareness, but there's. But I did.
I promise I won't shoot a hole on anything that you say
Well,
for the next 30 seconds. If I can restrain myself, and no promise. I've already did promise.
Back here, I got you up here. Good.
I know you're screwed, man. How do you think I feel?
Okay. Now.
This is good. This is good. Keep it going. We've killed 5 minutes. It's great. Almost lunchtime.
I can't stand it over, but it's my turn. Okay. Okay. So, and it's all obvious. It's just so simple and so obvious that it's nothing other than obvious.
Well, it's simple and obvious, but it's also inconceivably subtle, complex, bewildering, befuddling, confusing, and unfindable.
Oh, jeez.
Simple and obvious is not the opposite of that. It's all just, again, those are just different ways in which it can seem to be, organized / unorganized in terms of the way intelligence parses it, which happens spontaneously, continually, and mutually contradictorily simultaneously. Was that clear? I can put that a little more clearly if it wasn't clear.
No, don't go further
Okay.
with that one.
All right.
Uh,
No, this is really good. Keep it up.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, really. I mean, go for it. Hit it. Get it out.
So, confusion and discombobulation and what all of that is. I keep coming back to you because I just want to hear your experience. So all that confusion and everything for you is just another wow. Another just there it is there. And not even, it doesn't even have to go through there it is. It's just isness. Isness is.
It's isness for you too, isn't it? Or how would it be there? It wouldn't be there if it wasn't isn't. I mean, when you're confused or pissed off or whatever you get, that is there because of isness. I mean, if it wasn't isness, it wouldn't be there. It wouldn't be actual. It wouldn't be. To be experienced is to be, by definition, right? I mean, being is true across the board. Whatever it looks like, what you can certainly say of it is that it is. You may not be able to say what it is or how it is. You can say maybe it seems to be this, or it seems to be that, or it seems to be.
So okay, so you just whatever, just relaxes, but then you're going to say no, it's not relaxes. You could do this, not relax, whatever.
No.
Just
there's one key. There's one key
yes, please.
that addresses all of this stuff. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it looks like. It doesn't matter whether it matters what it looks like. Even that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you think it matters or see that it doesn't matter or don't see that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. That undercuts everything. I mean, what it looks like does not change what it is.
I
That
get
is,
that, but if it doesn't matter,
if you get that, you get it all the way. If it doesn't matter, when you go out here and you lose it and you get pissed off and you get sucked into your neurotic delusions of being a person and you feel a nostalgia for, oh my God, it was so great in Satsang, it was so clear, where did it go? I've lost it. And none of that matters. The fact that it doesn't matter, what does that do? It's like you're seeing it on a TV or on a billboard or something. It's present information, but it has no implication. It has no connection to anything. It doesn't have any teeth. It doesn't do anything. It's just there.
which is what happened yesterday afternoon when I left here and the whole scene that I was in,
Sure.
and nothing mattered, and
Sure.
all this stuff was bouncing and this
Sure.
nothing mattered,
Sure.
and that's it.
Yeah, that's it. It never matters. And even if it seems to matter, that doesn't matter. Look at it this way. Suppose everything really matters and you just suffer through the rest of your life. You're on your deathbed and you have like a half a second left to live, and all of a sudden it all disappears. How much does it matter then?
Right.
When you go to sleep at night and it all disappears, how much does it matter then? When you blink your eyes or get distracted or someone goes, hey! How much does it matter then? Just at that instant. It's just open, undefined weirdness. That seems to be, however way it happens to seem to be, if it seems to be any way that it happens to seem to be. I'm not trying to
No,
just
I know, no,
play games with you and undermine
no,
your
no, no,
trains
no,
of
that's
thought.
not what I'm taking, I'm just letting, I'm done, I'm letting it morph. I
Cool.
mean, I'm letting it go. Boo.
Cool. Okay. Cool.
What you just said about everything disappears and it doesn't matter is it learning about itself in the individual?
Sure. Everything is it learning about itself. That it can appear and can seem to matter is exactly the same as when it disappears and it manifestly does not matter. Those are exactly the same condition, just looking different. You know, that's the whole nature of what this is. You know, you remember we started talking about this soul actuality that is here. It is what it is, but it always seems to be something else. And what it is not affected, what was not impacted one iota by what it seems to be. When you go to sleep, it seems to be nothing. It seems to be a disappearance into whatever. When you wake up, it seems to be all this information and detail in your life and all your obligations and this and that and your health and the. But it still isn't anything different. It's exactly what it was when you were going to sleep and seemed to be nothing and everything was disappearing. It's just, so all of these seemings, the way it seems to be, the way it seems to present itself, do not convey accurate information, you could say, in one sense. The information the actual information they can convey is transcendental beingness, which is the true information. The information of, oh, here's my life and it's Sunday and I have to remember to phone so and so and I have to remember to take my pills and I have to this and I have to that, is not accurate information.
Is the transcendental information, it doesn't matter, it's just a temporary scene flitting past me?
Yeah, well, it doesn't matter, it's not an information, it's just an implication of the actual information. The actual information is total internal transcendent purity beyond causality. Picture a light shining unstoppably in infinity for eternity.
Yes.
That's the soul event. It's always that. And it might look like you being a human being, and it might look like you sitting in this discussion. It might look like getting an altercation with someone. It might look like you going to sleep. It might look like you dying and seeing this light shining in infinity unimpededly for beyond space and time. It can look all these different ways, but what it is unaffected by what it looks like. And its very strange nature is to seem to look all these various different ways to the extent that happens, but it never actually becomes anything that it seems to look like.
And in itself, it being the big it,
Yeah.
It never changes what it is.
Never.
It is always what it is.
Always.
Always untouchable.
Always untouchable.
Has no memory.
Has no memory.
And is open at all times to all things.
Yes. Well, it's doing all things. So of course it's open to them. It's open to all things. And when you as the dreamer is open to all the dreams that you dream. You're open to them because you're doing them. And you could dream anything you could dream and you dream them. But you, the dreamer, is not affected by what you dream. The dreams are just a symptom of you, the dreamer. All of this apparent event is a symptom of this transcendental light shining in eternity forever. That's actually a pretty accurate description of what's going on here. I mean, of course, it's not really accurate. It's metaphorical, but it's pretty right on the money.
Yes, metaphors. All those who purport to be gurus or spiritual masters, and you said something about they're telling lies. Well, do they know they're telling lies?
Sure. The definition of a spiritual master is they know they're lying.
They know they're lying.
When you know you're lying, you're free of the lies, and it's our lies that trip us up. Lies are the sole mechanism of delusion is we're lying to ourselves, and we don't know it. If you know you're lying to yourself, how much of a problem can it be? If you know you're bullshitting, how can you get caught up in it? But if you're bullshitting yourself and you don't know it, then you can seem to be in all sorts of complications, which is what delusion, so-called, consists of.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
All specific information is lies. How about that? If for a blanket statement, all specific information is lies, and any specific information means anything in any sense specific. So that anything is a certain way is a specific information. It's a lie. It's wrong. By lie, I don't mean necessarily malicious. I just mean completely inaccurate, untrue. So, for example, and I'm using words now.
Yes.
We've been talking all day, and so all these words I'm saying have an implication of being specific information in terms of if you look them up in the dictionary, oh, he used this word and this word means such and such. So all that makes it inaccurate, i.e., lie. And so anything anyone can say is basically a lie. Anything you can tell yourself inside your mind is a lie. Again, it's not malicious necessarily. It's just inaccurate.
I see, because I'm thinking about one master, and I guess because this person is supposed to be very aware, very way up there, in this case, Yogananda is defining his take on Satan as it's a universal force, and its purpose is to keep us all bound in delusion. In fact, interesting, you used a similar metaphor earlier. But he wants to define it, categorize it, in which case.
But he's lying, and if he's realized, he knows he's lying.
There you are.
But it's not a problem that he's lying. It's not like he shouldn't lie. If you're going to use words, you're lying. So who cares? That's a given.
I got you.
And yet lies can be useful. Arguably. That may be a lie too, since it's words, right?
Arguably useful.
I'd like to get back to this isness.
Yes, good idea. Highly recommended.
And I have found that very useful in a lot of circumstances, but then not always. Sometimes my emotions are too strong.
Right.
And so I'd like a little advice
on
how to get free of, at that moment, I don't have it now, but I know I do, of being caught by emotions and I'll try to get out of them, and they're so strong.
The problem with trying to get out of anything or trying to address anything that seems to be presenting as a problem is by trying to get out of it, you're actually reinforcing it. You're orienting towards it as if it mattered. And the way the consciousness works, it basically works by sort of an auto-hypnotic mechanism. When the consciousness tells itself something matters, that makes it self-fulfilling, that it matters. So if you're in an emotional condition, you're trying to get out of the emotional condition, that's basically a hypnotic mechanism that's of you telling yourself, it really matters that this is happening, which is actually strengthening it, reifying it, making it more actual, more real. So it's very subtle. That's why I always recommend the best, the easiest, the most powerful and easiest, efficient way of dealing with these things is to train with them when you're not lost in it. So the best way,
exhausted?
When you're not lost in them.
Oh, lost in it.
So for example, if you have a problem getting lost in emotions, the easiest way to train on that is when you're not lost in emotions. When you have a certain degree of clarity, notice how your experience transcends analysis. Emotions are always specific emotions, like an emotionality you feel yourself getting caught up in, are always a result of holding things to be a certain way. You're telling yourself
things to be a certain way.
Yes, you're telling yourself a story and then having an emotional reaction to the story. You're saying, "Oh, that person shouldn't have done that. They were unkind to me, and that hurts me, so I feel hurt," or whatever. I mean, that's obviously just a particular example.
Well, yeah, but that's not deep enough. Emotion is like a loved one is very sick, and you're
Yeah, but you're saying the loved ones are sick and you're holding that as a problem. They shouldn't be sick. You're telling yourself this loved one shouldn't be sick, they should be healthy.
No, I'm saying I'm feeling a loss of,
Right, but you're feeling a loss, you're thinking that you have, you feel a loss, you're thinking that you have them.
oh, okay.
And so so that if you have them, then that's something you could lose. And that's, and both of those are inaccurate. You don't actually have anyone and you can't actually lose anyone. Because people are not entities. People are absolute inconsistent energy presences that have no coherence. So every time I see you, you're different. So there's no actual you that is a particular thing that I have. Every time you show up in my experience, the experience of you is different and unique from what it ever has been before and ever will be in the future. And who you are is what you are in the instant. And it's already gone, and now you're someone else.
So
And now
this
you're
is an attachment to an idea,
exactly.
what you started out with. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
You're-
it's not
you're-
real.
Exactly. You're defining conditions and entities and beings as existing in a certain way, and then you're defining chains of events as having certain implications relative to those existence. Like, for example, if you have a friend, you're defining them as being in your life, being there for you, being someone who matters, someone you need, or whatever. And then you're defining a fantasy of, oh, I'm going to lose them. And then you're having a fantasy of, oh, that would be horrible because I shouldn't lose them because I want them to always be here.
Or I have lost them.
Or whatever. Yes,
Yeah.
whatever. But
Yeah.
but you see what I mean? It's the same kind of basically a story. It's a narration, and the narration is inaccurate based on, because the only actuality is your experience.
Well, that's my experience, is the feeling that I've lost.
Right. But you're experiencing that based on a story, which is not based on your actuality of your experience. It's based on a sloppy generalizing about your experience.
So to get back to what you said, is to not be so caught up in strong emotions.
Right.
Is to go to where you're not very emotional.
Well,
and
Yeah. When you're not caught up in emotion,
yeah,
pay some attention to your instantaneous experience and notice how it's made of details, and notice how those details can't be pulled into coherence, can't be pulled into. Notice how they're unanalyzable. Let me see what's a good way to put it. How did I put it yesterday?
well, take
Court reporter, rewind, please.
a specific example.
Sure.
Like, say walking down the street,
Sure, walking down the
and you
street.
look around and everything's okay.
Sure, but there's not even everything to be okay. You're walking down the street, there's no street. There's patterns of light appearing in your field of vision. And your field of vision is appearing in this strange space of apparent self-consciousness. And the whole thing is just a very strange energy presence. And you can't even know that it's a street. You can't even know that it's walking. In fact, you're not moving. When you're walking down the street, you're standing still and the street's moving past you. Right?
And so you're saying this is when you would also.
You just notice that fact. Notice what your experience actually is
Yeah.
in the instant. And you notice that experience is an incoherent, instantaneous presence of information that doesn't actually hang together.
And apply that to emotions.
Let me give you an example from a metaphor that's more condensed and perhaps more concentrated.
Okay.
Suppose you're watching TV, and suppose you're watching a show that's very sad, and you're getting sucked into it and saying, "Oh gosh, whatever, it's a tragedy or whatever." But then you suppose you go to the TV and you look closely at it, you notice the TV is actually little flashes of color. They're little dots that aren't moving, and the dots are flashing and changing colors. And so you haven't been seeing a sad story. All you've been seeing is a matrix of dots flashing, changing colors. That's the only thing that's actually been happening. Is that anything to get sad about? Is that anything to be happy about? It's just a weird energy presence. Okay? And every TV show you've ever seen is nothing other than little flashing dots of light. Okay? What you're seeing right now is little flashing dots of light. Look very closely.
So compassion is
A fantasy.
belongs nowhere.
It's a fantasy.
It's a fantasy.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's not negated. You could say compassion is the absolute harmonious coexistence of all the flashes of energy. The flashes of light on your TV screen don't fight with each other. You could say that's a manifestation of pure compassion because they coexist in complete harmonious presence. That's the actual compassion. And then the fantasy of compassion of, oh, there are these beings and they have resonance and empathy and sympathy for each other, and all of that is the story you're watching, and it doesn't actually exist. All that actually exists is the little flashes of light on the TV screen. Yeah, wow. But it's possible to very directly notice this and experience it in your experience. Of course, it's harder to do when you're already torqued up behind some kind of emotion and being sucked into some narration, some sort of internal soap opera you're playing to yourself. But when you're less sucked into that kind of a mode, when you're sort of just feeling loose and easy and relaxed, then you can sort of look at your field of vision and notice how it's actually minute little flashes of light. Look at your field of sensation and notice how it's minute little tinglings. Like you can sit there in general, I can say, oh, I feel my elbows on the chair and I feel my butt on the chair and I feel my socks on my feet and I feel my clothes on my body, I feel the temperature of the air. See, I can generalize like that, but if I go to the actual presence of my sense of touch, it's a whole universe of little tinglings. Touch is actually little sparkling tinglings. And so what I call my elbows on the chair is not actually an elbow on the chair, it's actually a whole gestalt, just a sea of tinglings that present in a certain way. And when I feel my elbows come off the chair, then those tinglings change their texture to other, it can't be analyzed. You can't say what it is because it's what it is. It's not comparable to anything else, right? But still in all, it's directly observable that direct present experience is these very strange, discrete energy events that present as if they were a field, but that have no actual unification except in their texture. So the field of vision is an arbitrary field of sparkles that feel like light. And that's all it is. So that's what I'm seeing now is a field of sparkles that are appearing in visual bandwidth. There's no people, there's no room, there's no clock, there's no computer, there's no light. And yet I have an intelligence that can parse these sparkles as if there are people in a room and a light and a computer. Just like when you watch TV, all you're watching is little changing flashes of light on the screen, but you have an intelligence that can parse it as being, oh, there's two people and they're talking to each other and they're having an emotional moment. Even though that's not actually there, that's just a way of parsing information, which is actually there, which is the sparkles.
So that's true of sensation and pain too, right?
Look and see.
Yeah.
It's true across the board. All experience consists of these little sparkles.
Yeah.
Now the sparkles feel different, or you could say they have a different textural presence. That's how we can discriminate. That's how you can tell you're seeing something versus hearing something, right? You can effortlessly tell a sound from something you're seeing because the sparkles of sound, the twinkles of sound have a little different sort of texture than the twinkles of light. And you can tell the difference between a twinkle of light from a twinkle of sensation because, again, it has a different texture. But ultimately, they're just little sparkles. And essentially, they're all the same sparkles, just in this vast range of brand. When you're thinking, thought is just sparkles. There's no such thing as a thought any more than there's such a thing as a person. A person is an arbitrary collection of little sparkles in the visual field. A thought is an arbitrary collection of little sparkles in the mental field. It's mental and it's energy in the mental bandwidth that appears. Totally incoherent flashes that strangely seem to appear with all these intense degrees of apparent patterning. So they're analyzable as, even though there's just all of these discrete sparkles in my field of vision, they sort of seem to be grouped in all these patternings that are interpretable as being people and events and rooms and objects and so on and so forth. But those are like on the TV show. On the TV, it seems like a person talking, but that's just an arbitrary grouping of little sparkles that actually are not a person talking and have nothing to do with a person talking, even though they happen to present in a pattern that is interpretable as if it was that. Yeah, look at it. And so you can look at your experience and explore it in those terms. And of course, it's easy to do that when you're naturally in a more caught up condition. And the more you train in being with your experience that way, the more that directness of seeing what your experience actually consists of, I mean, really getting down to it, will tend to undermine and take the steam out of the tendency to get caught up in these interpretive frameworks and emotional reactivity to that. It won't necessarily eliminate it, but it doesn't need to eliminate it because they are a problem. They don't need to be eliminated. You just need to see that they're not actual.
Right.
And the same thing applies to any kind of personality events. All sorts of personality events and preferences and reactions and motivations and all that we're also familiar with will appear. But they're likewise discrete energy events of flashes, and they aren't actually as coherent as they pretend to be.
It's not a point to get rid of them, it's a
Right.
point to see what they are.
Yes, I couldn't have put it better. Exactly my words. You don't need to change anything. You just need to see what it is, and you will discover absolute transcendence.
So, at this moment, there's incredible silence, and the little personality or whatever that part of me keeps wanting to hold on to. So there's nothing to hold on to. There's nothing here.
Sure, but yet you can manufacture all sorts of virtues to hold on to, and then you continue to hold on to them. And that's
but
within
then
your
the
powers
minute I
too.
do, they leave. Like
Sure.
just the millisecond, like I wanted to grab onto Marina, like that would give me some sense of holding on. And then just even before I would touch her, it's like, that's not, there's no her.
There's no her. There's no Marina.
There is no Marina.
Marina's a fantasy.
I know.
Yeah.
And so, as is this,
Yeah.
in this
And yet, since there is no Marina, there's no need for there not to be a Marina. So if Marina's there and you're talking to her, that's cool too. Since there's no Marina, there's no impact, there's no downside, there's no problem, there's no implication.
But to grab Marina as a way of returning to something I'm familiar with right now in this moment, that's not going to work.
No.
Because I know
Sure.
that she's not there.
And you're familiar with this too, because that's where you've always been in this actuality of incoherent experience. You've never been anywhere else, so it's actually very familiar to you. And even as you're in this incoherent presence of actual experience, you are also with the mind's ability to parse it as being this and that, and there are words being said and they mean this, and you can answer that and think this about them and see various people and watch with it.
Right.
So all that can happen too within this actuality of incoherent energy presence. Nothing mutually exclusive. There's no either or.
Just at this moment, the incoherence is so much more pervasive, and I'm watching, listening, whatever, all these things popping up. I
Sure.
just can't even imagine how you're making these words come out of your mouth.
I'm not making them. How are you making the words come out of your mouth? You're not making them, they're just there. You don't have to make anything. You don't have to make the sun shine. You don't have to make people be here in the chairs. They're just there. You don't have to make words appear. You don't have to make emotions appear. You don't have to make thoughts appear. They're just there. And they aren't that. They're just this incoherent energy dance.
And they'll come when they're needed.
Or not. They come when they come. There's no need. Need is just another incoherent energy presence. Everything does itself. Even when you seem to be doing something, that's just doing itself.
This total blank, emptiness, whatever you call it,
Sure, it's an emptiness, but it includes all of this.
I got it, but it's a very, it's not like it's a big deal.
No,
But
it's normal
it's just it seems to be, it is seeming at this moment to be totally disorienting.
It is totally disoriented. It has no orientation.
That's it. Do you see?
There's no up or down, there's no in or out, there's no center of
there-
circumference, there's no
there
nothing.
isn't.
No, there's no, it isn't.
But there really isn't.
There really isn't. Really? Yeah, check it out.
I don't need to.
Well, cool. Then,
It's checking me out.
cool.
I mean, it's whatever the it is, it's checked out.
Cool. Dude. Welcome home. You never left.
Okay, thank you.
I'm thinking words and thoughts are the lies that create everything. That's not a problem, you know, that lie isn't, in the beginning was a word, etc. That's not a problem.
Right.
But but if within that manifestation, there's an identification as being, you know, a discrete entity, and other than that, you know, void, plenum, whatever that it came from, then that's, you know, then that's suffering and so forth. That's
It may seem to be suffering, but that's not a problem either.
yeah.
Because it departs from the void or the this or the being or whatever euphemism you want to throw at it.
Earlier I was thinking about, I think maybe you answered maybe by just saying it doesn't matter, but you're thinking about trying to juxtapose the fresh eyes of a 2-year-old with someone who's, you know, 30, 40, whatever, who so the experience, not wisdom, learning, those aren't a problem.
No.
Those aren't a problem, but things happen that make it, you know, seem like a problem because,
sure.
You know, and I think about, you know, that song from Jefferson Airplane, you know, Lather was 30 years old today, and et cetera, you know, but Lather still likes to, you know, lie about nude in the sand, drawing pictures of mountains that look like bumps and thrashing the air with his hands. I think that would be like good therapy, actually, you know, to do that, you know, just so it's like kind of like, okay, I'm reconnecting with something that's more real, and then then I can still go back and be a
it's
stockbroker.
not more real.
Okay.
This is an important point. There's all these different potential perspectives, and none of them is truer than any other. They're just all available, and so you are free to engage with whichever ones are most convenient, if that seems to be the case. So if you prefer going to a 2-year-old perspective, you're free to do so. If you really, or if you prefer to be sophisticated and you know and so on and so forth, you're free to do so. And nothing is gained or lost by these perspectives because the actuality is never conforms to these perspectives. The actuality is always incoherent, transcendental presence. So it's just down to your convenience of how you want to be with it. Should we take 5 minutes?
Learning and memory is not a problem.
Right.
There's something that we tend to do that creates suffering for ourselves. And I guess I would ask you to talk about what that is and what to do about it.
Oh, okay. Well, you imagine things the way you imagine them.
Okay.
And then they seem to have implications, and these implications may be problematic. But things are not actually the way you imagine them, even though you're free to imagine them that way. And even so suppose you're imagining things are a certain way, and suppose the implications of those imaginings are a problem. Things aren't actually like that. So it doesn't really matter. And yet it's viable to see it from that perspective and to have it seem to matter. And even that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they seem to matter, because it still doesn't matter, because what's actually going on here is never in any trouble. And so it gets down to personal artfulness. Since it doesn't matter how you are with this, you are free to the extent you are free. To the extent you have the artfulness to adopt a convenient perspective, you can adopt a perspective where there's no problems. If you find yourself adopting a perspective where there's problems, and if that adopting of that perspective is itself a problem, if it's a problem, there seems to be problems, then if you have sufficient artfulness or cleverness, you're free to migrate to a perspective where it's not a problem, either by going to an entirely alternate perspective where there are no problems, or within this perspective where there are problems, seeing that that's not a problem. In either case, you've solved the problems without actually changing anything, because problems are spin doctored into existence, and solutions are spin doctored into existence, and reality is beyond spin doctoring. And on that note, let's have a 5 or 10 minute break. Oh, I'm sorry, Lily.
No, you want, I'm just gonna ask you, one of those stack with your break?
No, not just now, thanks.
Not yet? Okay.
Great.
For us. Yes. At one point there were 4 people, and the car had to go, her streaming wasn't working. She's in the East Coast, she's in
I
Toronto.
got an ended at midnight in order to know.
This is your mother's thing. So yeah, it's broadcasting. There's a delay. There's a delay factor. And YouTube does a funny thing.
Actually works.
It tries to catch us itself. And it's still broadcasting, but we refresh, you just wait for it to catch up.
Which I never noticed.
It works.
You believe it?
Yeah, you must have seen it. Well, I can hear him snoring, so he must have been sleeping really well.
Proof of purchase.
Oh, yeah, he's fast.
I'm trying to total fire.
Or I tried the little jujubes. They taste like apples and a little bit like sweet tarts.
It's a mind blower.
Great and cereal. Cut up and then put them in like a granola and yogurt, a little bit of mushy, crunchy stuff. You just can't, very good.
Talk about you.
I'm gonna tell you, plant one of those. Whenever plant one of those in our garden, although I would be sure.
Absolutely.
Oh, really?
It's so hard to let go
Because-
of that.
Well, hopefully it'll grow in.
Why do you be sure?
Oh, yeah.
That's
Oh,
Somehow getting this is, you know,
Oh,
light.
J-U-J-U-E. You got it.
Are we
Like
going
a-
to
Yes.
Speaking
God, it was 12:30. All right, I brought that 12:30.
Conscious entities, you know, they say, okay, I'm separate and I'm
I guess
this
that's
and
Oh, that's
you know,
funny.
that's the whole deal, you know, and when in actuality, they are none other than that. You know, they've forgotten that they, you know, that's their central nature, all the mishigas doesn't matter, you know, what's going on. So if you can kind of get it, remember that, okay, I'm the light, you know, and all this stuff is going on, so it doesn't matter, it's not, it's an appearance, you know, and there's freedom in it to say, listen,
So your son's off, eh? This is his second semester, right? So he's been happy. He's been
Oh, he's thriving.
good.
I was at a meditation this morning. Oh yeah, there's a 12-step meditation. It's like 30 minutes. Anyway, I go there.
For 10 minutes, you can run to 7-Eleven and get some cigarettes and scotch.
I'm on that return.
How about
It was
it?
nice knowing you.
It's been fun.
I'm glad it doesn't matter. It's a really mild alternative.
See you at a meeting, maybe. Maybe not.
Maybe not.
This thing we have.
What are we doing?
Godzilla Ballet or whatever, making these. And you want to glue it. It's so embarrassing, you know, but why should it be?
Exactly.
And, you know, but you know, it's just a normal human response.
The thing is, I'm,
25 years.
you know, as a metaphor, when I turn on the TV, I want to be entertained. I don't want to be looking at dots.
Absolutely, and that's cool.
Yeah.
course,
Yeah, that's a good metaphor for regular life too.
totally. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with being entertained.
That's pretty bad.
But the point is to see that you're not stuck in it.
Yeah.
It's an entertainment you can turn on. You can actually turn it off.
Yeah, it's actually, and actually, when I'm sitting by myself in a room, whatever, it's a whole lot more interesting to be to be noticing complete chaotic vertigo, and sparkles.
And you can do that.
Right.
That's available. Any perspective is available. It's all down to the artfulness of which you can engineer availing it.
That makes such sense.
I did. It was sort of interesting when I was kind of devastated after, I was got to be by myself. Actually, I was ready for 4 after dropping them off, and I went home and just like, and basically howling. But it was interesting how, at the same time, whatever clarity wasn't affected by it. I mean, it was showing. It was again. It was showing us, clear.
Naturally, that clarity doesn't come and go.
Yeah.
Being doesn't come and go.
I have 2 friends, these guys, who do it with me, and we do kind of a funny take. What's your take on it? Well, when certain phrases in there, like I don't remember what they do exactly, but it's funny. And then I get to the instrumental part. The one friend, he plays it with the nose. So then he just plays with his nose and goes.
Interesting. I can make a chord.
One of the things that I told them that they said, what you should do is after you do the instrumental part is then take a hanky out of your pocket and wipe off the microphone. But he doesn't like that idea.
No,
He's
he
embarrassed
doesn't
by
like
that
that
idea.
idea.
Yes.
Oh, let's see. Oh, subject of entertainment. Yeah, anything coming out of a hole is considered, well, to the human mind, grotesque. The grotesque. Anything coming out of a human
The
hole.
mucus, yeah, I know.
Yes. Now anything going in.
Yes.
Now it's okay to talk about things going into a hole. But anything out of a hole.
I didn't really hear
Oh, yeah. I just did it at Collective a couple weeks ago. So it's so funny. It's like there's no coincidence, but I mean it's all right? First, it seems to me, that in my consciousness, this song was very confident because it's one of the songs I love to do. So it's like, oh, okay.
We have pepinos and kumquats.
Oh, boy.
I gotta look up pepinos and see what pepinos are.
And then there's jujubes.
Oh, yes, I got some jujubes.
I thought you didn't know there was a fruit named jujube.
There it is.
I
Right?
guess
These are canajo.
What are those?
These are pepinos and these are
I
kumquats.
know those are.
Yeah, pepinos. So I'm gonna look them up.
So many exotic fruits.
I know, she's got a green thumb.
She does.
She really has a green thumb. Let me look up pepinos.
Yeah.
We were just singing it softly,
Wow. This is awesome. I sent the preface for the sabbatical to my wife's sister, who's an anthropology professor at USC. She has various things come along with very interesting feedback on it.
Yeah.
It's going to great deed. It's great.
Okay,
I'll read it later.
I'm gonna start trying.
Both sides.
Tie. Louis.
That's the Judy call.
And I know that she wrote, Joni still wrote it, and Judy, she.
Big yellow tax, so you-
Warren, yeah,
Lazy,
two,
lazy.
excuse me. I don't wanna get it done above and You like sugar in my chai.
Love sugar in his chai.
I love sugar in my chai.
Oh, well, okay.
We love you.
Chai is just a
Are we ready?
chai is a carrot.
We'll have lunch soon, so we'll get plenty of time off.
Gosh.
So we're mostly back at resume. We'll have lunch before very long, so we'll have plenty of downtime. These 2-day events are fun, because you get to kind of, the second day you get to kind of wrap up, take off from the launching pad of the first day. The first day is kind of slogging through it, and the second day gets kind of easier, doesn't it? It's sort of an interesting thing.
Can we take questions from the internet if there happens to be any?
Sure, let's give anyone else an
Oh, no, of
opportunity.
course.
Okay.
I'm just-
Lewis.
Yes,
They
I'm
haven't
getting
been-
I'm getting my questions and clarification. Yeah, and you're right. You talk a lot about. In fact, we touched on before. All words other than being become lies. Because at the same time, all words are synonymous with being.
Yes.
Yes. So now in knowing this, we're free to use words with abandon.
Yes.
And still be and I have those phrases and still be telling the truth. Do you mean? Would another way of saying that would the words are simply art forms?
Exactly so. Very well put.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you drew exactly that. So use of words is an art form that has no negative repercussions.
Uh-huh.
You can say anything you want and you will not harm or damage reality. So at that point, you just say what you liked it for convenience or for beauty or for whatever, for whatever you find interesting.
So that's synonymous with a way of speaking the truth, then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's impossible to not speak the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also impossible to speak the truth. And of course that's no problem whatsoever, given the bizarre nature of this actuality.
So you could say that every action is an art form. Wow.
Absolutely, because every action as an action is defined into existence in imagination, because there's no actual action. All there is the dancing of these sparkles. So when I move my hand, that I'm moving my hand is being spin-doctored into existence because there's no hand and there's no moving. So moving my hand is itself, defining it as that is itself an art form. And, strangely, it's these art forms that consciousness does that creates the sense of bondage, that creates a sense of delusion. And yet when you see that it's an art form, that's liberation, because it's not a liberation by ceasing the defining. It's a liberation by discovering the defining is arbitrary, so you can use it for convenience or beauty or whatever. Or you can just, you know, be a hardcore meditator and just hang out in relatively undefined. But that's not a different condition than defining, because you're always in relatively undefined. Even if defining is happening, it's not actually anything.
Just another art.
Yeah, it's just another. It's another way of this actuality presenting itself as a partiality, which in no way impacts the fullness of what it is.
And that's the fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why it's called liberation. When you see that, that's why it's called liberation, because you're free of needing to be any particular way or not. You're free of all obligation. You're free of all stuckness. You're even free of needing to be free.
That's a big.
I'd like to explore a little bit about that you don't change something, but you do see what it is or try to see what it is.
Yes.
And I just had an experience as I had a thought and I didn't like it.
Right.
And so I didn't try to change it.
Right.
And so then I found, so this seeing what it is, I found myself doing a psychological thing about, oh, that goes back to when you were a kid, blah, blah,
No, that's
blah.
not seeing what it is.
No, okay. So seeing what it, so what would I do at that point?
You look at the presence of the thought, look at the presence of the reaction to thought as a present energy. How do you know there's a thought? You know there's a thought because something's there in your
Right.
experience.
Yeah.
See what it is that's there. How do you know there's a reaction to
It's
the
not
thought?
there now.
Well, but then it's not a problem, is it? It's fine.
Oh, interesting.
But it'll come back.
Let's put it that way.
Okay, cool. When it comes back, well, look at what is there now. Suppose you're having other thoughts, maybe. I don't know. And when you have, look at what is present. You look at what thought is, not in the abstract, but in the concrete instant. As you're thinking, look at what thought is. How do you know you're thinking? You know you're thinking because something's showing up in your experience. Exactly what is it that's showing up in your experience, and how is it showing up?
Okay, it's creating a feeling.
Well, that's a separate thing.
That's a separate thing.
Yeah. The feeling is that you can call it a feeling. That means something is showing up in your present too. You can in your experience too, and you can look at what that is. But don't confuse the two.
But they show up simultaneously.
Maybe, sure. Sound and vision show up simultaneously. Everything shows up simultaneously because everything shows up in the instant.
And when they do, it just seems like they're connected somehow, like one is a cause of the other.
Yeah, but that's because of sloppy analysis. That's because of thinking in generalities and supposing those generalities to be objectively true.
Just like seeing what you were talking about before, seeing your arm and seeing that there's your arm, as
Right.
opposed to anything else in the environment.
Yeah.
Boundaries that
Sure.
define your arm.
There are no boundaries. You know, if you look at your field of vision, the light coming from your face, I have my hand so it's sitting right next to your face, the light coming from your face and the light coming from your hand is just the same light. As far as the light goes, the light doesn't know the difference between my hand and your face. It's just light. And if I look at the edge of my finger, there's a little bit of a fuzzy area, then I see your face. And it's just light. The light from your face and the light from my hand are exactly the same. There's no boundary. Or I could say there's infinite. The boundaries are defined into existence. I could say there's a boundary between your nose and your cheeks. There's a boundary between the left side of your nose and the right side of your nose. There's a boundary between the bottom of the left side of your nose and the top of the left side of your nose. But those boundaries are just imaginary circles. And we might draw these imaginary encirclements based upon rough information. Like I might say, you, everything inside a body-shaped line around you, as opposed to the sofa, which is everything that's outside that line behind you. And yet, it's arbitrary. The line isn't actually there. You see, and arm. So here's my arm. My arm is defined into existence out of the continuum, the fullness of my experience, all of which is present as a unity, as the instant present. So the arm is arbitrary. Do I have an arm, or do I have a hand, a forearm, and an upper arm? You know, do I have, 18 billion cells? You know, it's just different ways. It's like there's this one pie, and you're imagining to yourself how many pieces you can slice it into. Oh, I can slice it into 2 pieces. I can slice it into 18 pieces. I can slice it into 360 billion pieces. But you're not actually slicing it, just imagining it. Because the field of experience doesn't actually get cut up by defining it as separate pieces.
So when you sort of dumb it down from forks to an actual arm,
You haven't done anything. That's all imaginary.
it's all imaginary. Yeah.
Yeah, and even an arm versus the world is imaginary.
There was a you may have. I went to see her speak one time, and she read a book. A neuroscientist named Jill Bolte Taylor, who had she called her book her stroke of insight or something. She had a stroke.
Yeah, I know about that.
Yeah, and like she was in the shower, and like she could not tell where her tile began.
Sure.
You know.
But that's a perspective. That's just a simple perspective. You can do that too. You don't need a stroke to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So you get, that's what we've been talking about. All these perspectives are arbitrary, and you can access them and explore them, and explore what they feel like, and explore what their implication is for yourself. Depending on your degree of artfulness of being able to play with this stuff.
I find it interesting that you can be just like catapulted into that, though. You know,
Sure.
just like she was just like catapulted.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, anything can happen, right? I mean, when you go to sleep, all this disappears. What talk about that?
Yeah.
Where's your arm go when you fall asleep?
Yeah.
Where's the world go when you fall asleep?
What is up with that?
That's the point. That's the point. So there's catapulting, you might call it, and then there's also being able to shift from one perspective to another as an art form, and you're free to explore all of that as much as you want, and you aren't actually stuck in anything. You know?
But when you go to sleep, you don't. You know, it's like it just happens. It's not
Sure.
like you're not
But everything
really
just
navigating.
But everything even navigating just happens if you do it.
Okay. Yeah, I got you.
It's all very slippery and subtle.
It's sneaky.
It's sneaky. It's very sneaky.
It's very
Tricky.
sneaky.
Dan?
So yeah, I guess I have a question about specificity, in that everything, not theoretically, everything is happening simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
And the focus Nazi can only see pretty much one thing at a time. It can flit around.
Right.
However, there's some part of me that is able to be with everything simultaneously, but it doesn't feel, it's a global thing.
Right.
Almost apart from focus, I would say.
Sure.
And it's more like the letting go, falling asleep type of awareness, if I were to try to categorize it.
Okay.
And I talked yesterday about the fuzziness
Mm-hmm.
about all of that. So I'm just trying to find I'm wondering where the specificity is in that, as opposed to the generalization, if I'm asking this correctly.
The specificity is in the fuzziness of the global field of presence. Focus is basically a lie. Focus pretends to create pseudo clarity, and it
Right.
virtually seems to, but in actuality, the sharpness of what's in focus is actually fuzzy if you focus closer.
Right.
So, and what's not in focus is more explicitly fuzzy.
Right.
So when you see the field, like you look at the field of your field of vision in real time, you see sort of a field of fuzziness. All the specifics are there, but they aren't particularly sharp. They're fuzzy.
Right.
And there may be the apparent focus flitting around that provides a pseudo sharpness. So the fuzziness which illustrates that the fuzziness can seem to come into various degrees of apparent sharpness while still being ultimately fuzziness.
Right.
And so all of that is the actuality of the whole issue of specificity versus the field versus.
So that's not, those aren't generalities.
No,
Just-
generalities is categorizations. All of that is actual energy presence. Generality is classifying that.
Oh, very interesting. Okay.
So the specificity is this field of vision present right here, right now. The generalization is that, oh, I'm seeing a room full of you all and I'm seeing Helen's living room.
So we're talking generalizations that is happening basically in the realm of labeling. And thought.
Yeah, fantasy. They coexist. So and they consist of each other in a way. What generalization consists of is, of course, specificity, is, of course, actual energy.
Well,
so
the
it's very
energy,
subtle.
right. Okay. I mean, the energy, mental energy actually is very fuzzy. It's like a mirage.
Yeah,
as a
but
feeling.
everything is very fuzzy, like a mirage, and yet it has this self-fulfilling power of the intelligence to come into apparent focus and apparent pseudo-focus. And when generalizations seem to become objectified, seem to become reified, they sort of seem to come into a pseudo-focus, even though when you look closely there, you don't find any coherence at all.
Yeah. It's just the trap of thinking, well, I need to see past generalities and be more specific.
Yeah.
So, it's actually, that's a kind of a, well.
There's no either or. Anytime you play any mode of experiencing off against any other mode of experiencing, you're lost. You're trapped in a game of supposing that it actually is that way. There's all these different modes and they coexist and you can navigate them and explore them freely.
Yes.
And they aren't opposite of you. None of them are opposite of each other. None of them are mutually exclusive. And none of them are problems. And all of them are this.
Yeah. So you can look specific, you're doing your hand, light,
Sure.
your face, but and also you can do the global
Sure.
generalized fuzzy.
And when you're doing the one and doing the other, you're actually doing the same thing. You're just spin doctoring it as the one and spin doctoring it as the other.
Oh, okay.
It's always the same thing's always happening.
Gotcha.
And so all of the, oh, I'm doing this now, and now I'm doing that is all spin doctoring. So navigating is spin doctoring.
Well,
because you're all
I mean,
doing all of it all at once.
Yeah, but when I really look closely here and I look at the edge here, it's a whole lot different than sleep.
Is it? You
Yeah.
say that, that's spin doctoring.
Well, enough. You're gonna have to tell me how. You're gonna have to tell me how they're the same. I mean, I really don't. I mean, because
it's always infinitely different, and it's always exactly the same, and that makes
letting go.
absolutely
Letting
sense.
sleep to me is like letting go.
Okay.
And this one's really honing.
Yeah, but honing in and letting go are one and the same thing.
I hear the words. I don't know.
You could say letting go is honing in on globalism.
On vast, yeah. Huh.
Mm,
That's weird.
It's all weird. I mean, nothing is anything. Nothing is definitively anything. And that anything asleep is falling asleep is itself spin doctrine. There's no such thing as falling asleep. Any internet questions, Lily?
No.
Good.
Haven't been.
And so what about, you were talking about death before, you know?
That's an abstraction. Let's talk about concrete. Talk about what's in your actuality.
For example, when my mother passed.
Right.
Okay. So if there's no death, but I don't see her here anymore, so.
You don't see her here when she wasn't here. You don't see her here when she was at her house. You don't see her here. Suppose you went to her house and never left and you never went there.
Yeah.
You'd never see her.
Yeah.
You might talk on
But
the
does
phone.
that mean she doesn't exist? Or she never did exist?
What does exist
or...
mean? When you say she exists, what does she mean? What, as far as you know, what was she ever?
My mother.
No. As far as you know, if you look closely, she was an aspect of your experience.
Yeah.
Does your experience exist? then what she really was hasn't gone anywhere. The aspect of her that looked like her in any given instance is gone, but it was gone anyway. Because every time you experienced her, there was a unique experience in that instant. You saw her that way, and you never saw her that way before, and never saw her that way since.
So in essence, you're sort of saying that she's still here?
Well, as much as she ever was here, there was no her. It's just you. It's just this. And she was an aspect of this.
The experience of her is still
Just like I am an aspect of this. And this is the field of your experience, your actuality, your beingness, which is this field and which transcends any specific aspect of this field, and while including it.
And so there's no expression of time
Right.
in experience.
Right.
So you could say that she's...
Well, it's not that there's no expression of time, it's that what time is actually is unfathomable.
So in other words, my experience right now, you're in my experience.
Right. You could say
So
that.
when you leave and go home,
Right.
you're not here in my experience at this moment.
Right. But your experience hasn't lost anything, it just looks different. It's still just your experience. And now it's just your experience. Now your experience looks like me talking. When I go home, your experience won't look like me talking. It'll look like something else, but it'll still be 100% your experience, just as much as it is now.
So
The only thing that's
So you
ever
want
present
to-
is your experience.
so you want to exist. So when you go out of my
I don't
life,
exist. I will exist as much as I do now. Because all I am really for you is your experience, which exists. When you see me, you're not seeing me, you're seeing. You're seeing vision.
Okay.
I am an abstraction. You're claiming that there's a me here because you see a field of vision and you're defining a certain portion of it, a certain me-shaped portion of it as me. And you're hearing your field of hearing, your field of sound, and you're defining a certain me-shaped segment of that sound as my words. And so because of those two abstractions, you're taking a portion of your experience and defining it as being me, being present.
Okay.
But and before I was present, your experience wasn't any less full than it is now, although it wasn't full of a portion of it that you were defining as a me presence.
So I'm kind of disillusioned then when I define it as being you that is talking.
You're what?
Disillusioned?
Not disillusioned, you're just abstracting.
We saw.
It's like a Rorschach blot. A psychologist shows you an ink blot
Yeah.
and says, what does this look like? And you say, oh, that looks like a bird flying in the sky. There's no bird there, there's no sky, but that you're defining that into existence by seeing it that way. It's basically spin doctoring.
Yeah.
And this is the way we construct our world. We construct our world by spin doctoring it into existence against the background of the Rorschach blot of this experiential field actually is.
So young babies, we saw a baby in a restaurant yesterday
Uh-huh.
that just didn't have the focusing thing
Sure.
going on. Too young, I guess.
Sure.
So, and I remember my son when he was like that.
Sure.
And so is that like because they're not
For them,
seeing
it's all ink blot.
specifics?
Yeah, for them, it's all ink blot. There's no birds flying in skies
It's all ink blot.
in
Wow.
terms of the Rorschach
So it's
analogy.
all okay.
Just raw energy. Raw
So they
energy
have no
presence.
definition for anything that's going on around them.
Of course.
As far as
And even
noise.
when they start defining, it's still just raw energy. They're just adding to that by defining it. The defining doesn't change it from raw energy. The raw energy, there's nothing but the raw energy here. The defining is just a harmonic of the raw energy itself. The defining is made of the raw energy and doesn't add anything or subtract anything from the raw energy. It doesn't change the raw energy. Remember yesterday, all day I was talking about there's this, and what seems to happen, it doesn't affect it one way or the other.
Yeah.
So defining its ability to define itself as all these various things doesn't actually add or subtract anything to it. When you define to yourself in your imagination that you're seeing me, you aren't actually changing your experience. You aren't adding anything to your experience or subtracting anything from your experience. And when you define your experience as not seeing me, you're not adding anything to your experience or subtracting anything to your experience. You're just doing a different definition. If you weren't defining your experience, you wouldn't know if I was coming or going.
Yeah. I wouldn't know if I was coming or going.
Right? And yet, this would be here.
Mm-hmm.
This is always here. Right? This is always here, right here. Always looks different, but it's always here.
So one might kind of have an identity as primary identity as infinite light, let's say, and then that, and not identified as, you know, a body that's sleeping, that's waking, that's dreaming, that's dead.
Sure. That's doable.
Okay.
There's all these different perspectives available. You know, the important thing is to see what the basis is for all of the spin doctoring. And when you see what the basis is, then you see very directly for yourself what the spin doctoring is and what the implications of the basis are beyond the spin doctoring. And you discover, you know, the absolute independence of this, that what this is does not depend upon what it looks like, does not depend upon apparent circumstances. You discover that it is eternal. You discover that it is causeless. You discover, you know, and you discover that you are it. There's no you separate from it, and there's no it separate from you. So you discover that you exist as an eternal, transcendental presence beyond life and death, beyond space and time, even while you're sitting here in this talk.
Mm-hmm.
And when you discover that, that is realization, which is just means realizing what is going on here. And that has a nice feeling tone to it, because all this fear and anxiety about the implications of apparent circumstances is just invalidated, because who gives a shit? Because what you actually are is eternal and causeless and invulnerable. So who cares what seems to happen? So there's no neediness, there's no dependency, which is liberation, which is realization.
And so how accurate would it be to, you know, a number of teachers out there like to summarize it this way, that we have this body, we have our stories and emotions and our thoughts, but all of that comes and goes, and we're simply the pure, timeless awareness behind all that. Is that synonymous with that here?
Roughly, except that there's no behind.
There's nothing behind.
The pure transcendental eternal awareness and the having our bodies and having our this and having our that are one and the same thing. So it's not like there's one behind another.
Oh, okay.
It's not just two. It's not just two layers or two worlds, or a world of specifics and a world of transcendental. There's only one actuality, and there's just different ways of seeing itself.
Okay.
But otherwise, that's fine.
Only one actuality. Got it.
See, this is the real stuff. You guys are doing really good. You know, you're really being with this very very directly, and that's the whole point. You know, just because the more directly you are with it, the more freedom you have to enjoy it. The more freedom you have to participate with it artfully and in various ways. The less stuck you are in thinking you are a certain thing, or are stuck being a certain thing, or need to be a certain thing, or need to get out of something, or have some problems you need to solve, or all this stuff. All that's seen is just completely arbitrary.
Well, and what you just said seems to go beyond what a lot of these success coaches out there say. They talk about you simply, we can help you grow into the person that you're destined to be. It's about becoming a fuller expression of your authentic self, and any parts of yourself that may be suppressed. So
I think that meeting may be down the street. A couple houses down.
Any number.
Any number, it doesn't matter.
What I'm saying is it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
By all means, grow into the person you're destined to be, or grow away from the person you're destined to be, or tell destiny to kiss your ass and do whatever you want to do, or whatever, and it's all good.
I was wondering if you could co-create something this afternoon.
That's down the street the other way. Or, but yeah, sure. Go create away.
It's just it's all an arbitrary choice as far as
Yes. It's an arbitrary choice, so you're free to exercise your options to the extent you have the artfulness to be able to do so.
There you go.
There's still this feeling of wanting to tweak my perspective a little bit so I can see this, or the feeling that maybe there's nothing I can do to tweak it. It's going to tweak itself, or I don't know. There's still this feeling that something has to shift. You know what I mean?
Is something any particular way that it would needs to shift from? If something has to shift, then there has to be some way that it is.
Just being in the fog, just being in the fog.
Are you in a fog?
Well, so to speak. In the fog, in other words, not being able to see clearly.
No, there is no clarity. The fog is it. And yet the fog appears with perfect clarity. How do you know there's a fog if it wasn't appearing in perfect clarity?
This is true.
So there's always fog, there's always clarity, there's always all of these different dimensions, there's always fuzziness, there's always specificity. There's an infinite degree of detail and there's an infinite degree of fuzziness, always. That makes absolutely no sense. And of course the mind tries to collapse it down to one or the other.
It does.
But it never actually can.
Yeah.
It can pretend to, and it can successfully do a kind of auto-hypnosis that it has succeeded in that, but it does never actually succeed. This is always what it is. It's always infinite clarity, infinite fuzziness, infinite, patterning and detail, infinite chaos and unresolution, or let's call it incoherence. And all of those always exist 100%. And that's completely paradoxical, but there you go.
Well, when you were doing that thing where you had your hand looking at my face and your hand here, and then you were talking about the line here, but it's like, okay, so if I'm focused on your face, this is fuzzy, and you're clear. But then I can look at this, and then you're fuzzy in the background.
Right.
So apparently, I don't know. I'm just illustrating the point that it all exists at the same time.
Sure.
I'm trying to convince myself, I guess. I don't know.
Just play with it. You play with it and you'll see what it is. And the very nature of what it is that it can seem to be presented in all the astounding range of different modes that it can seem to be presented in. But it's still just this, that whose nature is to seem to be able to seem the way it seems to be able to seem. Yeah, it can seem sharp. Yeah, it can seem fuzzy. Yeah, it can seem this. Yeah, it can seem that. Yeah, it can seem... But it's still this, that it seems that all those ways. And those seemings are not mutually exclusive. It's not like it seems one way, that means it's not the other way. It's also the other way too. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's the way that it is at once. It's what it is at once all the time. But the strange slippery nature of that is that it seems to present as all these seemings that seem to sort of surge into relative dominance from moment to moment in various incoherent ways and so on. But that's just part of the way it seems.
It's just so unfathomable.
It's so unfathomable, yeah.
And
what it is unresolvability.
And crazy making.
It's only crazy if you're trying to make sense of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Be loose and easy with it, and it's this amazing, luscious, miraculous weirdness.
Yeah.
Which is what it is. Yeah, it is all. I mean, this, you know, if you don't think this is awesome, you're not looking closely.
Can you talk about the dream yoga a little? What is dream yoga about? What's the benefit of practicing it?
I never said there's any benefit practicing dream yoga.
Yeah.
What's your idea about?
I have
what
no
dream yoga
idea
is?
what the dream yoga is about, but
Okay,
I
me
feel
neither.
Yeah. but there apparently there is a practice called dream yoga practice.
There's all kinds of practices.
Does it have any value?
I don't know. Anything has value if you engage with it with intelligence and artfulness.
But I'm kind of feel like if one can't even see what this is doing when they are not sleeping, and how could they recognize it when they're asleep?
It's a good point. You know, from my point of view, I would say, see what this is. By hook or by crook, any old which way you can. If you have to do it in your dreams, fine. But see what this is. It always is what it is. It's always plain to see. See that, and all your questions are answered. And then it's up to your individual luck or creativity or intelligence or artfulness or whatever to find ways to do that.
No, I just heard some people who are practicing dream yoga and they don't even know what this is.
Yeah, what's the point?
So how are they going to recognize it? But for me, when I sleep, and I dream.
Sure.
And
the point is to see what this is. And, you know, most people apparently who do most practices apparently seem to succeed in doing them all very well without noticing what this is. So my recommendation is find a way to see what this is by hook or by crook, any way you can manage. And then worry about practice, worry about practices when you're interested in practices. It's like learning practices is like learning to ski or learning to play piano. You want to learn dream yoga, learn dream yoga. You want to learn to play piano, learn to play piano. And any of those can be a vehicle for seeing what this is, or any of those can be a vehicle for confusing yourself and tying yourself in knots and feeling shitty. Like Buddhists, people can, be very sincere practitioners for decades and still not see what this is. What's the point? The whole point of doing anything is to see what this is, my opinion. Obviously, I'm in the minority.
Related, with a lucid dream, I'm in my experience. It's just the same as right now.
Sure.
Experience. But that would be a possible place to really get clarity on this.
Sure, or not. And any experience is a place to get clarity on this or not. And not getting clarity on this is getting clarity on this. Because the major mode of this is to be unclear about itself. All unclarity is direct revelation of the transcendental nature of reality. This is unclear as hell.
Yeah. Say, taking clarity back out of my question there. Within that as another experience, it's my experience.
Yeah.
There's an opportunity there, I'm suspecting.
Yes, always opportunity. Always.
Grok this, to get this.
Yes. When this is here, there's opportunity to get this. When this is here, there's opportunity for this to recognize itself. And of course, fortunately, this is always here, so that opportunity is omnipresent. Why don't we break for lunch, if you all would like that? Let's see, it is now 12:10, why don't we meet back here around 1:30-ish or shortly thereafter, but roughly an hour and a half or whenever it's convenient. And when the majority of people are back here, we'll dive back in. So online people, if anyone's watching, we or not, or people in the future. If you're in the future, you can access the next segment by clicking on your browser. If you're in real time, you'll have to wait an hour and a half. And if you're in the past, I don't know how you're going to get to it. You have to have really good reception.